I was on a ladder outside our bedroom window when I heard my wife Cindy talking to her sister Dahlia through her laptop speakers. The window was cracked because it was hot that Thursday afternoon in July, and I guess she figured I was too high up and too far away to hear anything. She was wrong. Look, I need to give you some context before I get into what I heard because otherwise this is going to sound insane. My dad has stage 4 lung cancer. 3 months to live, maybe 4 if we're lucky. He's 68 and he's been a good father to me my entire life. We're not rich, but he worked hard his whole career and saved carefully. And between his life insurance and his retirement accounts and the sale of his house, I'm looking at inheriting around $400K. Cindy knows all this because we've had several conversations about it over the past 6 months since Dad got diagnosed. She was supportive. She held my hand at the hospital. She brought Dad homemade soup. I thought we were in this together. We've been married 4 years. I'm 32, she's 30. We have a prenup because my dad insisted on it before the wedding. He paid for a lawyer to draw it up. It's airtight. Cindy wasn't thrilled about signing it back then, but she did. And honestly, I thought we'd move past it because our marriage seemed solid. We rarely fought. We had date nights. We talked about starting a family next year. So there I was, up on a ladder installing new gutters on our house because the old ones were rusted through and leaking into the basement. It was around 2 p.m. and I'd been working since morning. I just finished the front section and moved the ladder to the side of the house, near our bedroom. The window was open maybe 4 inches and I could hear Cindy's voice clearly. She was on a video call and I recognized Dahlia's voice immediately. They're close. They talk probably 3 times a week. Dahlia asked when Cindy was planning to tell me. Tell me what? I thought. I stopped working and just listened. Cindy laughed and said after Blake's dad dies, after the inheritance clears, then she wants her half before the divorce. My brain didn't process it at first. I actually thought maybe I'd misheard. But then Dahlia brought up the prenup and asked how Cindy planned to get around it. Cindy told her sister that her lawyer said the prenup protects premarital assets and inheritances, but there are ways to challenge it. If she can prove I commingled the inheritance with marital assets, or if she deposited even $1 of it into our joint account, she might have a claim. Her lawyer apparently told her that if I use any of the inheritance for joint expenses like the mortgage or home repairs, she could argue it became marital property. She was literally planning to push me to put the money in our joint account and spend it on the house. Dahlia called her smart. Smart. My wife is planning to divorce me the second my father dies and take half of everything he worked for his entire life, and her sister thinks that's smart, but it got worse. So much worse. Cindy told Dahlia she'd been sleeping with Dwayne for 8 months. Dwayne? My best friend since college. The guy who was best man at our wedding. The guy who comes over every Sunday to watch football. The guy I've known for 14 years. 8 months? While my father was dying. While I was driving 2 hours each way every weekend to spend time with Dad before he's gone. While I was crying in bed at night and Cindy was rubbing my back telling me it would be okay. Dahlia asked if Dwayne knew about the divorce plan. Cindy laughed again and said Dwayne thinks they're running away together. He thinks after I get the inheritance and Cindy divorces me, she's going to take her half and they're going to move to Arizona and start fresh. But that's not her plan at all. Her actual plan is to take the money, divorce me, and ghost both of us. She called Dwayne a moron. She said he's been useful, but she's done with him once she gets paid. I climbed down from that ladder very carefully. I didn't storm inside. I didn't confront her. I just packed up my tools, loaded my truck, and drove to the hardware store like I needed more supplies. I sat in the parking lot for probably an hour just thinking, processing, trying to figure out what to do. Here's the thing that maybe makes me a cold person. I don't know. I wasn't devastated. I was angry, like that kind of anger that sharpens everything instead of clouding it. My dad is dying, and this woman who promised to love me is counting down the days until she can rob me. The grief I'd been feeling about Dad got shoved into a box, and all I could think about was how to protect what he's leaving me and how to make sure Cindy gets exactly nothing. I called Dwayne. I told him I needed to talk to him in person, that it was about Cindy, that I thought something was wrong. He agreed to meet me that evening at a bar near his apartment. When I got there, he looked nervous, guilty, good. I told him I'd been noticing Cindy acting strange and I was worried she might be cheating on me. I watched his face. He's not a good liar. He got this look like he was trying to figure out what to say. So I pushed harder. I said I loved her, and I was terrified I was going to lose her, and I didn't know what to do. I actually teared up a little bit, which wasn't hard because I was genuinely upset, just not about what he thought. Dwayne broke. He told me he had to be honest with me. He said he and Cindy had gotten close over the past few months and things had gotten complicated. He said he never meant for it to happen. He said he was in love with her. He said she was planning to leave me and she wanted to be with him, but she was scared about the financial situation because of the prenup. I played it perfect. I got angry at first, then I got sad. Then I got resigned. I told him I couldn't believe this was happening, but if Cindy loved him, then maybe I should just let her go. I said maybe we should just file for divorce now and get it over with. Dwayne looked relieved. He actually looked relieved that I was going to make it easy for him. Then I told him about my dad. I said Dad had maybe 2 months left and I was inheriting a significant amount. I watched Dwayne's eyes light up. I said I was thinking about putting the money into our joint account so Cindy and I could pay off the house before we split everything. That way we'd both be in better positions for the divorce. Dwayne loved this idea. He said that sounded really fair and mature. He said Cindy would appreciate me being so reasonable. I wanted to break his nose right there, but instead I just nodded and said I needed some time to think about everything. I left that bar knowing exactly what I needed to do. Dwayne thought he was getting a woman and a half of $400K. Cindy thought she was getting $200K and freedom. Neither of them knew I'd heard everything, and neither of them knew I was about to burn their entire plan to the ground. I drove to my dad's house that night. He was having a good day, relatively speaking. His hospice nurse had just left, and he was sitting up in his recliner watching television. I sat down and told him everything, every single word I'd overheard, every detail of my conversation with Dwayne. Dad didn't say anything for a long time. Then he asked me what I wanted to do. I told him I wanted to protect his money and I wanted Cindy to get nothing. He nodded and said we should call his lawyer in the morning. We spent the next 3 hours going over his estate plan. His lawyer, who Dad has worked with for 30 years, was willing to do a house call given the circumstances. We restructured everything. The inheritance was going into an irrevocable trust with me as the sole beneficiary. The trust documents explicitly stated the funds could never be commingled with marital assets. Every dollar would be tracked. If I died, it would go to Dad's chosen charities, not to any spouse. Cindy would have zero legal claim to any of it, no matter what argument her lawyer tried to make. The lawyer also suggested something else. He said I should document everything I was observing about Cindy's behavior, not to use for any criminal purpose, but to show a pattern of intent to defraud. If she later tried to claim she deserved part of the inheritance because she'd been a supportive spouse during Dad's illness, I'd have evidence that her support was calculated and false. So that's what I started doing. I installed a voice-activated recording app on my phone and kept it running whenever Cindy and I were in the same room. I saved every text message she sent me. I kept a detailed log of her activities, who she saw, when she saw them. I checked our cell phone records online and confirmed she was texting Dwayne constantly, sometimes 30 or 40 times a day. I also started documenting our marital assets. I made copies of all our financial statements. I photographed every valuable item in our house. I wanted a complete record of what was mine before the marriage and what we'd acquired together. The prenup already protected most of my premarital assets, but I wanted ammunition. And then I did something that might make me a jerk, but I don't care. I told Dwayne I'd decided to give our marriage one more real try before filing for divorce. I said I wanted to take Cindy on a trip, just the two of us, to see if we could reconnect. I told him this was my last effort to save what we had, and after that, if it didn't work, I'd let her go. Dwayne encouraged this. He said it showed real maturity and growth. He said even if things didn't work out, at least I'd know I tried everything. What he didn't know was that I was buying time. Time to let Dad finalize the trust. Time to document more of Cindy's affair. Time to prepare. I came home that night and Cindy asked me where I'd been. I told her I'd been at Dad's and it had been a hard visit. She hugged me and said she was sorry and asked if there was anything she could do. I said no, I just needed to process things. She rubbed my back and told me Dad was lucky to have me. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to tell her I knew everything, but I didn't. Because I'm not interested in a confrontation right now. I'm interested in revenge, and revenge requires patience. Dad's lawyer finished the trust paperwork 4 days later. Everything is locked down. Cindy has no path to that money, none. Even if she's somehow convinced a judge that she deserves something, the trust is untouchable. Dad signed everything while he was still of sound mind, with his lawyer and 2 witnesses present. It's bulletproof. Now I'm just waiting. Dad's condition is stable for now, but we all know what's coming. Cindy thinks she's got 2 or 3 months to keep up the act. She doesn't know that every conversation we have is being recorded. She doesn't know that I've already met with 3 divorce attorneys to discuss my options. She doesn't know that I've moved $15K from our joint account into a separate account in my name only, which is legally allowed since there's no divorce filing yet, and I'm prepared to account for every dollar of it. And she definitely doesn't know that Dwayne told me everything about their affair because he thinks I'm going to make the divorce easy and profitable for everyone involved. She has no idea that her partner in crime is actually my biggest source of information now. Yesterday, Dwayne texted me asking if I'd thought any more about the divorce timeline. He said Cindy was getting anxious about when we'd tell people and start the legal process. I told him I was still processing, but I'd probably file something in the next month or two. He seemed satisfied with that answer. Cindy came home from work yesterday and immediately went into our bedroom and shut the door. I heard her on the phone with Dahlia again. She was complaining that I was dragging my feet on the divorce and she was worried I'd put it off until after Dad died, which would complicate her financial planning. Dahlia told her to be patient and to keep being supportive and loving, so I wouldn't suspect anything. So that's where I am right now. My father is dying. My wife is counting his money. My best friend thinks he's going to ride off into the sunset with her and half of my inheritance. And I'm sitting here with legal documents, recorded conversations, and a plan that's going to destroy both of them financially and emotionally. Some of you are probably thinking I should just file for divorce right now and be done with it. But here's the thing. If I file now, Cindy will know I'm onto her. She'll lawyer up immediately. She'll stop talking to Dwayne about their plans. She'll be careful. I'll lose my advantage. Right now, she thinks she's winning. She thinks I'm a grieving son who's too distracted to notice what's happening in his own marriage. She thinks Dwayne is on her side. She has no idea that I'm 10 steps ahead of her. I want her to think she's getting away with it right up until the moment she realizes she's not. I want Dwayne to believe he's getting his happy ending. And then I want to watch both of them understand exactly how badly they miscalculated. Dad told me last week that the best revenge isn't anger, it's precision. He said to make sure every move I make is calculated and documented and legal. He said to let them hang themselves with their own rope, and all I have to do is hold it steady. So that's what I'm doing. I'm holding steady. I'm being the grieving son and the trusting husband. I'm letting them think they're in control. And when the time is right, I'm going to show them exactly what happens when you try to steal from a dying man and betray someone who loved you. I'll update this when things progress. Because they're going to progress, and when they do, it's going to be spectacular. Edit. Some people are asking why I don't just confront them now. Fair question. But think about it. If I confront Cindy today, she divorces me. And because Dad's still alive, she has no reason to wait around. The prenup means she gets almost nothing from me directly. Maybe the value of our marital assets split evenly, which is basically just furniture and one car since I owned the house before we married. She walks away with maybe $20K total. But if I wait until after Dad passes and the inheritance is distributed into the trust, and then I reveal everything, she's been planning this for months. She's told her sister about it. She's consulted a lawyer about challenging the prenup, and I have recordings of all of it. She looks like exactly what she is. Someone who stayed married to a grieving man specifically to steal his dying father's money. That's not just losing the money. That's losing her reputation, her family's respect, everything. Same with Dwayne. Right now, he thinks he's in love. I want him to find out who Cindy really is in the worst possible way. Update 1. Some of you called me cold, some called me smart, and a bunch of you said I should just confront Cindy and Dwayne immediately and get it over with. I get it. But here's what's happened since I posted, and I think you'll understand why I'm playing this the way I am. First off, shout out to the commenter who suggested I should check if Dwayne and Cindy were communicating through apps that delete messages. You were absolutely right. I've been monitoring our phone bill online and the text frequency between them has actually decreased over the past 2 weeks, which makes no sense given that they're supposedly planning this whole future together. So either they're being more careful or they've moved to something like Snapchat or Telegram. I couldn't just ask Dwayne about it without raising suspicion, so I did something that felt kind of scummy but necessary. Last Wednesday, I invited Dwayne over to watch a playoff game. Just the two of us, beers, pizza, the whole normal routine we've had for years. Cindy was supposedly at her mom's place helping with some furniture moving. Perfect. About halfway through the second quarter, Dwayne went to the bathroom. He left his phone on my coffee table, face down. But still, I had maybe 90 seconds. I grabbed it and the screen lit up with a notification from Cindy. They're using WhatsApp. The preview showed enough to confirm they were still actively planning things. But I couldn't open the actual app without his passcode. When he came back, I was on my couch exactly where I'd been, watching the game. He picked up his phone and checked it. I saw his expression change slightly. He was reading something from Cindy, but trying not to react in front of me. Then he put the phone in his pocket and said he needed to take a call from work. Stepped outside for 10 minutes. I guarantee he was texting Cindy back. I guarantee she was asking if I'd mentioned anything about the divorce timeline. And I guarantee Dwayne told her everything was fine. I was still processing. No red flags. Here's what kills me. When he came back inside, he asked me how I was holding up with everything about Dad. He put his hand on my shoulder and told me he was here for me no matter what. This is the same guy who's been sleeping with my wife. The same guy who thinks he's going to get half my inheritance. And he's sitting there pretending to be my supportive best friend. I told him Dad had maybe 6 weeks left, that the doctors had adjusted their timeline. I watched Dwayne's face, and I swear I saw something like relief mixed with guilt. He said he was sorry and asked if there was anything he could do. I said no, just having him around helped. He nodded, and we went back to watching the game. But then he said something that made my blood pressure spike. He asked if Cindy and I had talked any more about our relationship problems. I said not really, we'd been focused on Dad. Then Dwayne suggested that maybe after Dad passed and I'd had some time to grieve, it might be good for Cindy and me to sit down and have a real honest conversation about whether our marriage was working. Think about that. He's suggesting I should have an honest conversation with my wife after my father dies, after the inheritance clears. He's literally coaching me toward the exact timeline they've already planned, and he's framing it like he's being a good friend giving me relationship advice. I agreed with him. I said he was probably right, and after everything with Dad was settled, Cindy and I would need to figure out what we wanted. Dwayne looked satisfied, like he'd successfully moved his chess piece. The game ended, and he left around 11 p.m. The second his car was out of my driveway, Cindy texted me asking if I wanted her to come home or stay at her mom's for the night. I told her to stay, that I was tired and going to bed early. She sent back a heart emoji. I guarantee she wasn't at her mom's. I guarantee she was with Dwayne. And I guarantee they spent that night celebrating how well their plan was going. The next morning, Thursday, I drove to Dad's house. He's been declining faster than the doctors expected. He's sleeping most of the day now, and when he's awake, he's exhausted. But he's still sharp mentally, still understands everything that's happening. I sat with him for a while and told him about the situation with Dwayne and the WhatsApp messages I couldn't access. Dad suggested something I hadn't considered. He said I should make Dwayne think I'm actually starting to move forward with the divorce before the inheritance comes through. Make him panic. Make him push Cindy to slow things down because they're losing control of the timeline. Dad's logic was this. Right now, Cindy and Dwayne think they have me exactly where they want me. Grieving, distracted, compliant. But if I suddenly start acting like I want the divorce now, before Dad dies, that ruins their financial plan. Cindy only gets value from waiting until after the inheritance. If I file before then, she gets almost nothing, and Dwayne ends up with a girlfriend who has no money. So that's what I did. That Friday, I texted Dwayne and asked if we could meet for lunch. He said yes immediately. We met at this diner we used to go to all the time in college. I ordered coffee and barely touched it. I told Dwayne I'd been thinking a lot about what he said about having an honest conversation with Cindy. Then I told him I couldn't wait anymore, that staying in a marriage I knew was over was killing me, that I wanted to file for divorce within the next 2 weeks and just get the process started. I said I'd already contacted a lawyer. I said I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Dwayne's face went white, like actually lost color. He immediately started backtracking. He said maybe I was making this decision too fast, that I was grieving and not thinking clearly, that divorcing while Dad was sick would add too much stress. He said Cindy and I should try counseling first. Counseling. This man who's been having an affair with my wife for 8 months suddenly thinks we should try marriage counseling. I pushed back. I said I'd made up my mind and I needed to move forward for my own mental health. Dwayne got almost desperate. He said rushing into divorce was a mistake, that I'd regret it, that Cindy deserved a real chance to work on things. He was literally trying to talk me out of divorcing his affair partner. Then he said something that confirmed everything. He said if I filed for divorce right now while emotions were high and Dad was declining, I might not be thinking clearly about financial decisions. He said I should wait until I was in a better headspace to make those kinds of permanent choices. He was protecting their timeline, protecting the inheritance plan, and he thought he was being subtle about it. I pretended to consider his advice. I said maybe he was right, that I was probably acting on emotion, that I'd think about it more. Dwayne looked relieved again. He paid for lunch and told me to take my time, that there was no rush, that everything would work out the way it was supposed to. I went home and Cindy was there. She'd been grocery shopping and was putting things away in the kitchen. She asked how lunch with Dwayne went. I said it was fine. We just talked about Dad and work stuff. She nodded and said she was glad I had friends to lean on during this time. Then she hugged me. She wrapped her arms around me and put her head on my chest and told me she loved me and we'd get through this together. I hugged her back and told her I loved her too. And the whole time I was thinking about how she'd already planned exactly when she was going to leave, how she'd calculated down to the dollar what she thought she could take from me. That weekend, Dad had a particularly bad episode. His pain wasn't being managed well, and he ended up in the hospital for 2 days while they adjusted his medications. Cindy came with me to visit him on Saturday. She brought flowers. She held Dad's hand. She told him she was praying for him. Dad looked at her and thanked her. Then he looked at me, and we had this whole silent conversation with just eye contact. He knows. He knows exactly what she is. And he's watching her perform this caring daughter-in-law act while planning to rob his son. After we left the hospital, Cindy cried in the car. She said seeing Dad like that was so hard. She said she couldn't imagine what I was going through. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I wanted to tell her right then. I wanted to lay out everything I knew, but I didn't, because Dad's right. The best revenge isn't confrontation, it's precision. On Monday, Dad came home from the hospital with an updated care plan. Hospice is involved now. He has maybe 3 to 4 weeks left, maybe less. The timeline is accelerating and I can feel Cindy's anxiety increasing with it. She's been asking me more questions about the estate. Nothing direct, just casual mentions about whether I've talked to Dad's lawyer lately, whether the will has been updated, whether I know what's involved in settling an estate. She's positioning herself, making sure she seems concerned and helpful. Last night she brought up the idea of us refinancing the house. She said with interest rates where they are, we could save a lot on our monthly payment. She said maybe after everything with Dad was settled, we should look into it, that it would free up money for us to do things like travel or finally start trying for kids. She's already planning how to get me to use the inheritance on joint assets, already setting up the argument that we commingled the funds. Her lawyer has coached her well. I told her refinancing sounded like a good idea and we should definitely look into it later this year. She seemed pleased. But here's what she doesn't know. I met with another attorney yesterday. Not for divorce yet, for something else. I'm having him draw up a post-nuptial agreement. It's basically like a prenup, but created during marriage. It can specify that any inheritance received by either party remains separate property and cannot be considered marital assets under any circumstances. The attorney said that in our state, post-nuptial agreements are legally binding as long as both parties sign voluntarily and with full knowledge. The catch is getting Cindy to sign it, but I have a plan for that too. I'm going to tell her that Dad's lawyer is requiring it as a condition of the inheritance distribution, that the trust has stipulations about keeping the funds separate, and if I don't get Cindy to sign a post-nuptial agreement acknowledging that, the funds go to charity instead. I'll frame it as protecting both of us, protecting her from any legal liability if something goes wrong with the estate, making sure the inheritance can't be seized or complicated by any future issues. And here's the beautiful part. If she refuses to sign it, that's proof she only cares about access to the money. If she signs it thinking she can challenge it later, she's locked out anyway. Either way, I win. The attorney said we could have the document ready within a week. I'm waiting until Dad passes to present it to her. In that moment of grief, with the inheritance suddenly real and tangible, I'm betting she'll sign whatever I put in front of her. Meanwhile, I've been documenting more of her behavior. I set up a small camera in our home office that activates on sound. I've caught her on the phone with her sister twice more, both times discussing the divorce timeline, both times speculating about when would be optimal to file. One time she was literally looking at apartment listings in Arizona. Dahlia asked if Dwayne knew those apartments were just for show, and Cindy laughed and said, no, she was letting him think they were picking out their future home together. This woman is playing everyone. Me, Dwayne. Even her own sister seems slightly uncomfortable with how far she's taking it, and she thinks she's going to win. Dwayne texted me yesterday asking if I'd given any more thought to the divorce thing. I told him I'd decided to wait, that he was right about not making big decisions during grief. He replied within seconds, saying that sounded wise and mature. I'm giving them exactly what they want. I'm being predictable, controllable, the grieving husband who's too distracted to notice what's happening in his own life. But I'm also building a case. Every text message, every recording, every witness to their affair. When this goes to divorce court, and it will, I'm not just going to protect my inheritance. I'm going to make sure Cindy walks away with nothing but the shame of everyone knowing exactly what she tried to do. Some of you in the comments asked about my relationship with my dad and whether this is worth putting energy into when I should be focused on his final weeks. Fair question. But here's the thing. Dad wants me to do this. He's the one strategizing with me. He's the one who suggested the post-nuptial agreement. Knowing that I'm protecting what he's spent his life building is giving him peace. He's worried about leaving me vulnerable, and this is how I can show him I'm not. We spent 3 hours together on Tuesday just talking. Not about Cindy or the inheritance, just father and son stuff. Memories, stories, things he wanted me to know. And at the end of it, he told me he was proud of me for not being a victim, for not just accepting betrayal. He said too many people let others walk on them because confrontation is uncomfortable. But sometimes the right thing to do is fight back. So that's what I'm doing. I'm fighting back. Methodically, legally, completely. Dad has maybe 3 weeks left. Cindy thinks she has 3 weeks until payday. Dwayne thinks he has 3 weeks until his new life starts. None of them know what's actually coming. I'll update again after things progress, because they're going to progress fast now. Update 2. This is going to be long and I'm writing it while running on maybe 3 hours of sleep, so bear with me. Dad died on Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. I was holding his hand. Cindy was in the room too, standing behind me with her hand on my shoulder. The hospice nurse was there. It was peaceful, as much as death can be peaceful. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't wrecked. I was. I am. Dad was my best friend and the only parent I had left after Mom died when I was 19. But even in that moment, even watching him take his last breath, part of my brain was thinking about what comes next, about the plan, about making sure everything he worked for goes exactly where he wanted it to go. Cindy cried. She actually cried. Real tears. I don't know if she felt genuine sadness or if she was just that good at performing. But she held me while I fell apart and she didn't say anything. Just let me grieve. For about 10 minutes, I almost forgot what she was. Almost. Then we went home, and she made coffee and sat with me on the couch and asked if there was anything I needed. I told her I needed to call Dad's lawyer and start dealing with the estate. She nodded and said she'd handle everything else. All the calls to family, all the arrangements. Whatever I needed her to do. I called Dad's lawyer from our bedroom with the door closed. He expressed his condolences and told me he'd start the probate process immediately. The trust was already set up, so distribution would be straightforward once everything cleared. He asked if I'd talked to Cindy about the post-nuptial agreement yet. I said no, not yet. I was waiting for the right moment. He said to let him know when I was ready and he'd have the documents prepared. When I came back downstairs, Cindy was on her phone. She put it away quickly when she saw me. I sat down next to her and she asked how the call went. I told her the lawyer was handling everything and it would probably take a few weeks to process. She asked if he'd mentioned how much the estate was worth. I said around $400K after everything was liquidated and taxes were paid. I watched her face. She tried to look sympathetic and supportive, but I saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. She squeezed my hand and told me Dad had worked hard his whole life and he'd be proud knowing I was taken care of. I said I wished he'd had more time. She agreed and said we both wished that. The funeral was on Friday. Huge turnout. Dad had a lot of friends and colleagues from his 40 years in manufacturing. Dwayne came. He sat 3 rows back during the service. Afterwards, at the reception at our house, he pulled me aside and asked how I was holding up. I told him I was numb. He said he understood and if I needed anything at all, just ask. Then he asked if I'd talked to the lawyer yet about the estate. I said yes, briefly. He asked if everything was straightforward or if there were complications. I told him it seemed pretty standard. Just had to wait for probate to clear. He nodded and said that was good. At least I wouldn't have to deal with legal drama on top of everything else. He was fishing, trying to figure out the timeline, trying to figure out when the money would actually be available. I let him fish. I gave him just enough information to keep him calm, but not enough to actually plan around. Cindy was playing the grieving daughter-in-law perfectly. She wore black. She greeted guests. She organized the food and made sure everyone had what they needed. Dad's brother, my Uncle Christian, pulled me aside at one point and told me I was lucky to have such a supportive wife. I agreed and thanked him. If he only knew. After everyone left and we cleaned up, Cindy and I sat in the living room and she asked if we should talk about what happens next. I asked what she meant. She said with the estate settling and everything changing, maybe we should discuss our finances and how to handle the inheritance responsibly. Here it was. The opening move. She was starting the process of getting me to commingle the funds. I told her I'd been thinking about that too. That Dad's lawyer had actually mentioned something about making sure the inheritance stayed protected and separate from marital assets. Cindy's expression shifted slightly. She asked why it would need to be separate. I said something about tax implications and estate planning, kept it vague. She pressed a little and said we were married, and what was mine was hers and vice versa, wasn't it? I told her the prenup complicated things. That Dad's lawyer was being very careful about how the money was distributed to make sure it didn't create any legal issues down the road. Cindy went quiet for a minute. Then she said she understood but hoped I knew she'd never try to take anything that was meant for me, that she just wanted us to be financially stable together. The lies just roll off her tongue. I told her we'd figure it out together and not to worry about it right now. She nodded and dropped it. But I could see her mind working. She was already planning her next approach. That night after Cindy fell asleep, I went through her phone. I know her passcode because she's never changed it from the one she set up 3 years ago. I opened WhatsApp and found her conversation with Dwayne. The messages from the past week were all about timing. Dwayne was asking when she thought she'd talk to me about divorce. Cindy kept telling him to be patient, that she needed to wait until the inheritance actually cleared into my account so she'd know exactly what she was working with. Dwayne was getting antsy. He said he'd already given notice at his apartment and found a place in Arizona he wanted to put a deposit on. He asked Cindy if she'd talked to her lawyer about the prenup challenge yet. Cindy told him she had, and her lawyer said the best approach was to wait until I deposited the inheritance into our joint account or used it for joint expenses. Then she'd have grounds to argue it became marital property. She told Dwayne to just trust her and give her a few more weeks to position everything correctly. Dwayne asked if she was sure I'd put the money in the joint account. Cindy said she'd convince me it was the smart thing to do for tax purposes and estate management. She said I was grieving and not thinking clearly and she could guide me into making the right choice. The right choice. She actually wrote that. Then there were messages about me, about how I was handling Dad's death. Dwayne said I seemed really broken up at the funeral. Cindy said she knew and she felt bad. But this was what had to happen for them to have their future. Dwayne said he felt guilty sometimes. Cindy told him not to, that I'd be fine eventually and they deserved to be happy. I screenshotted everything, backed it all up to a cloud account she doesn't have access to. Then, I put her phone back exactly where she'd left it. The next morning, Saturday, Cindy's sister Dahlia called. Cindy took the call in our bedroom, but I could hear her through the door. Dahlia was asking if the lawyer had mentioned anything about the trust structure. Cindy said not yet, but she was worried about it. Dahlia told her to be aggressive about getting me to consolidate the inheritance into accessible accounts. Cindy said she would, but she had to be careful not to push too hard too fast or I'd get suspicious. Dahlia agreed and said the timing had to be perfect. Then she asked about Dwayne. Cindy said Dwayne was getting impatient and she might need to sleep with him a few more times to keep him calm. Dahlia laughed and said, whatever it takes, to steal from her dead father-in-law and destroy her husband. On Monday, I met with Dad's lawyer again. He had the post-nuptial agreement ready. It was 8 pages of legal language that basically said any inheritance I received from my father's estate would remain my sole separate property and could never be claimed as a marital asset, regardless of how it was used or distributed. It acknowledged that Cindy understood and agreed to these terms. It was notarized and witnessed. The lawyer said this document, combined with the trust structure, made it virtually impossible for Cindy to claim any part of the inheritance. Even if she challenged it in court, she'd lose. He asked if I was ready to present it to her. I said yes. I was ready. That evening, I told Cindy we needed to talk about something serious. She got this concerned look and asked if everything was okay. I said yes, but Dad's lawyer needed her to sign something related to the estate, that it was standard procedure but legally required before the inheritance could be distributed. Cindy asked what kind of document. I explained it was a post-nuptial agreement that clarified the inheritance as separate property, that the trust Dad set up required this acknowledgement or the funds would go to charity instead, that it was just a formality to protect both of us from any tax or legal complications. Her face went through about 5 different expressions in 3 seconds. Surprise, concern, calculation, forced understanding, and then fake relief. She asked if she could read it first. I said of course and handed her the documents. She read through it slowly. I watched her realize what it meant. She asked why Dad's trust would require something like this. I said Dad's lawyer explained that it was about protecting the estate from any future creditors or legal claims. That by keeping the inheritance completely separate, we were both protected. Cindy asked what would happen if she didn't sign it. I said the inheritance would go to Dad's designated charities. All $400K. She asked if there was any other option. I said no. This was the only way. She was trapped. If she refused to sign, there was no money to take. If she signed, she couldn't touch it. But she didn't know that I knew her plan. She thought she could still figure out a way around it after signing. Her lawyer had probably told her that post-nuptial agreements could be challenged. She asked if we could have a few days to think about it. I said the lawyer needed it signed by Friday or the estate would move forward with a charitable distribution, that we were on a deadline. Cindy said she wanted to talk to her own lawyer first before signing anything. I expected this. I told her that was fine, but to make sure she talked to them this week because Friday was firm. That night, she was on the phone with someone for over an hour. I assume her lawyer. When she came to bed, she seemed agitated. I asked if everything was okay. She said yes, just stressed about everything. I said I understood and we'd figure it out together. Tuesday morning, Dwayne texted me, asking if I'd made any decisions about what to do with the inheritance. I told him it was still being processed through probate. He asked if there were any complications. I said just standard legal stuff. He said to let him know if I needed anything. Translation? He was trying to figure out what was taking so long and whether their plan was still viable. Wednesday, Cindy told me she'd talked to a lawyer and they'd reviewed the postnuptial agreement. She said her lawyer had some concerns about the language, but ultimately, if it was required for the inheritance, then she didn't have much choice. She asked if we could make any modifications to the agreement. I said no. It was a standard document provided by Dad's estate lawyer, and the trust requirements were non-negotiable. that we either signed it as written or declined the inheritance entirely. She asked what I wanted to do. I told her I wanted to accept the inheritance because it's what Dad wanted and he worked his whole life for this. That turning it down would dishonor his memory. She agreed and said she'd sign it. We went to the lawyer's office Thursday afternoon. Cindy signed every page. The lawyer notarized it. Witnesses signed. It was done. Legally binding. Cindy had just signed away any claim to the inheritance, and she thought she was being clever by doing it to keep the money in play. Afterwards, in the car, she asked when the funds would be available. I said probably another 2 to 3 weeks for probate to fully clear. She nodded and said we should start thinking about how to best use the money. Maybe pay off the house like we'd discussed. Maybe invest some of it. Maybe take a vacation. Every suggestion designed to commingle the funds and give her an argument in divorce court. I agreed with everything. Said we'd sit down soon and make a plan. She seemed satisfied. That night I got a text from Dwayne asking if Cindy and I were doing okay, if our marriage was in a better place. I said we were working on things. He replied saying he was glad to hear it and he hoped everything worked out the way it was supposed to. The way it was supposed to, like their plan. Friday morning, the probate court officially released the estate. Dad's accounts were liquidated. The life insurance paid out, everything transferred into the trust with me as sole beneficiary. $387K total after all taxes and fees. The lawyer called and confirmed everything was complete and the funds were now in an account in my name only, managed by the trust. Cindy doesn't know yet. I haven't told her, because now comes the part she's been waiting for. Now comes the part where I'm supposed to deposit this money somewhere she can access it. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is I'm meeting with a divorce attorney Monday morning. I'm filing papers Monday afternoon. And Cindy is going to find out everything has been for nothing. Dwayne texted me this morning asking if I wanted to grab lunch next week. I said sure. He has no idea that lunch is never happening. That by Monday evening, his entire world is going to explode. I have recordings of Cindy discussing her plans with Dahlia. I have screenshots of her WhatsApp messages with Dwayne. I have the post-nuptial agreement she signed acknowledging the inheritance is separate property. I have documentation of their 8-month affair. I have everything I need. And the best part? Dad's trust includes a provision that if Cindy contests the divorce or tries to claim any part of the estate, she's responsible for all legal fees on both sides. Dad's lawyer built in a penalty for fighting. Every dollar she spends trying to take what's not hers will cost her triple. This weekend, Cindy has been cheerful, almost giddy. She thinks everything is lining up perfectly. She thinks in a few days I'll deposit that money somewhere she can trace it and track it and claim it. She's probably already planning her divorce filing strategy with her lawyer. She has no idea that I've been planning this for longer than she's been planning her betrayal. She has no idea that every move she's made has been exactly what I wanted her to make. She has no idea that Dad and I spent his final weeks making sure she'd get absolutely nothing. Monday morning, I'm filing for divorce. Monday afternoon, her lawyer is getting served. Monday evening, Dwayne is getting a full explanation of exactly what Cindy was really planning to do with him. And then I'm going to sit back and watch everything they thought they had disappear. Some of you are going to say, I should have just filed for divorce the second I found out about the affair, cut my losses, moved on. But that's not justice. That's not protecting what Dad built. That would have let Cindy pivot and regroup and maybe find another angle. This way she loses everything. Her marriage, her plan, her affair partner, her reputation, everything. I'll update after Monday when the papers are served and Cindy realizes what I know. Because that conversation is going to be nuclear, and you all deserve to hear how it goes. Final update. I'm writing this from a hotel room because I cannot be in that house right now. Everything happened today, and it was somehow worse and better than I imagined. Let me walk you through it because you all deserve to know how this played out. Monday morning, I met with my divorce attorney at 9 a.m. We filed the papers at 9:45 a.m. Grounds for divorce, adultery. I provided copies of the WhatsApp screenshots, the recordings of Cindy talking to Dahlia, the phone records showing constant contact between Cindy and Dwayne. My attorney said it was one of the most well-documented cases of infidelity she'd ever seen. The papers also included a complete financial disclosure showing the inheritance in the trust as separate property with the signed post-nuptial agreement attached. My attorney requested that Cindy receive nothing beyond her personal belongings and her car. No alimony, no settlement, nothing. Because in our state, proven adultery impacts the division of assets and spousal support. Cindy was served at 2:30 p.m. at her workplace. I know because my attorney texted me when the process server confirmed delivery. I was at home waiting. I'd taken the day off work. I wanted to be there when she got home because I knew she'd come straight there. She walked through the door at 3:15 p.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table. She was holding the divorce papers in her hand, and her face was pale. She looked at me and asked what this was. I told her it was exactly what it looked like. She said we needed to talk about this, that there had to be some mistake. I asked her what mistake she thought there could be. She started saying something about how we'd had problems, but we could work through them. We could go to counseling. This didn't have to end our marriage. I pulled out my phone and played one of the recordings. Her voice talking to Dahlia about waiting for the inheritance to clear before filing for divorce. Her voice discussing how to convince me to commingle the funds. Her voice laughing about how she'd been sleeping with Dwayne for 8 months. Cindy went completely silent. She just stood there listening to her own voice planning my financial destruction. When the recording ended, she asked where I got that. I told her I'd recorded every conversation she'd had in our house since July, that I knew everything, every detail of her plan with Dwayne, every conversation with her lawyer, everything. She tried to deny it at first, said the recordings were taken out of context, that she'd never actually planned to go through with anything, that she was just venting to her sister. I played another recording, this one where she explicitly talked about timing the divorce to maximize what she could take from the inheritance. Then Cindy switched tactics. She started crying and saying she'd made mistakes, but she still loved me, that the thing with Dwayne didn't mean anything, that she'd been confused and scared about my dad dying and she'd made terrible choices, but we could fix this. She reached for my hand and I pulled away. I told her I knew she'd signed the post-nuptial agreement specifically to keep the inheritance in play so she could divorce me and claim half, that I knew her lawyer had told her she could challenge it later, that every single thing she'd done for the past 4 months had been calculated and fake. Cindy asked how long I'd known. I told her since July, since I overheard her on that video call with Dahlia while I was installing gutters. She actually looked shocked. She said I'd known since July, and I hadn't said anything. I told her I was waiting for exactly this moment, waiting for her to think she'd won before I took everything away from her. She got angry then, asked why I'd let her sign the post-nuptial agreement if I knew what she was planning. I told her because it made my case easier, because now she had no legal claim to the inheritance, and she'd signed a document acknowledging that fact. She said that was manipulative. I said so was sleeping with my best friend while my father was dying. Cindy demanded to know what I wanted. I told her I wanted her out of my house by the end of the week, that according to the prenup and the post-nuptial agreement, she was entitled to half the value of our marital assets, which amounted to about $18K total, that she'd get her car and her personal belongings, and that was it. No alimony because of the adultery. No share of the house because I owned it before we married. No share of the inheritance because she'd signed away any claim. She said that wasn't fair, that she'd been my wife for 4 years, that she deserved more than that. I asked her what she thought she deserved for planning to rob me while I grieved my father. She didn't have an answer. Then she tried a different approach. She said if I'd just let her explain everything, if we could just talk about this like adults, maybe we could work something out. Maybe we didn't have to get divorced at all. Maybe this was all just a huge misunderstanding. I told her there was no misunderstanding, that I had recordings of her telling Dwayne she was going to ghost him after she got the money, that I had screenshots of her looking at apartments in Arizona that she never intended to actually use, that I knew she'd played both of us and her plan was to take the money and disappear on everyone. Cindy's face changed when she realized I knew about that part too. She asked if I'd told Dwayne. I said not yet, but I was planning to. She begged me not to. Said Dwayne didn't need to know everything, that it would just hurt him for no reason. I told her I thought Dwayne deserved to know exactly who he'd thrown away 14 years of friendship for. She started crying harder. Real tears now. Not because she felt guilty, but because her plan had completely fallen apart and she was realizing she was losing everything. She asked what I wanted her to tell people, how she was supposed to explain this to her family. I told her she could tell them whatever she wanted, but I was going to tell the truth. Then she threatened me. Said if I told people about the affair, she'd make up things about me, that she'd tell everyone I was abusive, that I'd controlled her and isolated her. I pulled out my phone again and showed her the legal documents from the trust that specified if she made any claims against me or the estate, she'd be responsible for all legal fees on both sides. I told her if she lied about me, I'd sue her for defamation, and she'd spend whatever money she walked away with on lawyers, that I had documentation of everything, and she had nothing but lies. She went quiet again. Cindy asked if she could stay in the house while she looked for an apartment. I said no, that I wanted her gone by Friday. She said that wasn't enough time. I said she should have thought about that before planning to divorce me. I told her she could stay with Dahlia or her mother or anyone else, but not here. She asked about the money from selling our marital assets, when she'd get her $18K. I told her after the divorce was finalized and everything was liquidated, probably 2 to 3 months. She said she needed money now to put a deposit on an apartment. I said that wasn't my problem. Cindy sat down at the kitchen table and just cried, not trying to manipulate anymore, just crying because she'd lost. After a while, she asked if I'd ever loved her. I told her I'd loved who I thought she was, but that person didn't exist. The real her had been planning this since at least March based on when she first contacted her lawyer. She admitted she'd talked to a lawyer about divorce options back in March. She said it started because she was unhappy and felt like our marriage was stagnant, that I was always focused on work or my dad, and she felt neglected, that Dwayne had been paying attention to her and making her feel valued, and one thing led to another. I told her if she'd been unhappy, she should have said something, should have asked for counseling, should have done literally anything except start an affair and plot to steal my inheritance. She said she knew that now, that she'd made terrible choices, that she was sorry. I asked if she was sorry she did it or sorry she got caught. She didn't answer. I left her sitting at the table and went upstairs to pack a bag. I'm not staying in that house while she's there. My attorney said I don't have to, and honestly, I can't look at her anymore. When I came back downstairs, she was on the phone. I heard her telling someone she needed a place to stay, probably Dahlia. Before I left, I told her I'd be back on Friday evening and I expected her to be gone, that she could take her clothes, her personal items, and her car. Anything else stays. She nodded without looking at me. I drove to Dwayne's apartment. It was 6 p.m. I knocked and he opened the door looking surprised to see me. I asked if we could talk. He let me in. I sat down on his couch and told him Cindy and I were getting divorced, that I'd filed papers this morning. Dwayne tried to look sympathetic, but I could see the excitement behind it. He started to say something about how he was sorry, but maybe it was for the best. I cut him off and told him I knew about the affair, that I'd known since July. His face went red. He started to stammer something, but I kept talking. I told him I'd heard Cindy planning the whole thing with her sister, that she'd been using him to make me jealous or to have backup or both, that her real plan was to divorce me, take half the inheritance, and then disappear on both of us. Dwayne said that wasn't true, that Cindy loved him, that they were going to move to Arizona together. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots of her messages with Dahlia, the ones where she called him a moron, where she said she was just using him, where she talked about ghosting him once she had the money. Dwayne read them. I watched his expression change from defensive to confused to hurt to angry. He asked if this was real. I told him I had weeks' worth of evidence, that everything Cindy had told him was a lie, that she'd never intended to actually be with him. He sat down. He looked like I'd punched him. He asked why Cindy would do that. I said because she's not who either of us thought she was, that she'd played both of us, that the only difference was I'd figured it out and he hadn't. Dwayne asked if she knew I was telling him this. I said probably. I'd told her I was going to. He asked what he was supposed to do now. I told him that was up to him, but I was done with both of them, that our friendship was over, that I didn't want to hear from him again. He tried to apologize, said he never meant for any of this to happen, that he'd genuinely fallen in love with Cindy and thought she felt the same way. I told him he'd slept with my wife while my father was dying and no apology would ever make that okay. Then I left. I've been at this hotel for 3 hours now. Cindy has called me 7 times. I haven't answered. Dwayne texted twice asking if we could talk more. I blocked his number. My attorney called an hour ago to tell me Cindy's lawyer had already reached out requesting a settlement conference. They want to negotiate. My attorney asked what I wanted to do. I told her no negotiations. We go to court and we go with everything we have. The adultery evidence, the recordings, the financial planning conversations, all of it. My attorney said that was going to be expensive and drawn out. I told her I didn't care, that Cindy spent months planning to rob me and I was going to make sure everyone involved in this case knew exactly what she did, that I wanted it on the public record. My attorney said she'd inform Cindy's lawyer that we weren't interested in settling. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with my uncle Christian to tell him what happened. He was at the funeral. He told me I was lucky to have Cindy. He deserves to know the truth. So does everyone else who thought she was this supportive, grieving daughter-in-law. I'm also calling my accountant to make sure every dollar of the inheritance is documented and tracked, that there's no possible way Cindy can claim I commingled funds or use them inappropriately. The trust is already set up for this, but I want triple confirmation, and I'm changing all the locks on the house before Friday. I don't trust Cindy not to make copies of the keys or try to come back after she moves out. Some of you are going to say I'm being too harsh, that I should just let her take the $18K and move on with my life. But here's the thing. This isn't about the money. This is about the fact that she counted down the days until my father died so she could rob me, that she faked grief and support while planning betrayal, that she manipulated everyone who loved her. She doesn't get to just walk away from that with a slap on the wrist. She doesn't get to tell people we grew apart or it didn't work out or whatever sanitized version of events she wants to spin. She gets to face exactly what she did and exactly what she is. The $18K she's getting from marital assets, that's probably going to go to her lawyer fees when she tries to fight the divorce terms and loses. The postnuptial agreement is ironclad. The trust is untouchable. She has no case. But I guarantee her lawyer will convince her to try anyway and rack up bills. Dwayne already gave notice on his apartment because he thought he was moving to Arizona with Cindy. Now he's got to find a new place while dealing with the fact that he destroyed a 14-year friendship for a woman who was using him. I don't feel sorry for him, but I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some satisfaction in knowing he's lost everything too. As for me, I'm grieving my father. I'm grieving my marriage even though it was based on lies. I'm grieving the best friend I thought I had, but I'm also relieved because I know I did everything right. I protected what Dad wanted me to have. I documented everything. I made sure Cindy couldn't take what wasn't hers. Dad would be proud. That matters more than anything else. I'll update one more time after the divorce is finalized, and I can share the final outcome. But for now, Cindy knows I know. Dwayne knows he was played. And I'm sitting in this hotel room knowing I won.